Hello, everyone. I am Melissa Alderfer. I'm the Research Education Lead for the Mentored Research Development Award Program as part of the Delaware CTR SL Professional Development Corps. I'm here today to talk a bit about the Mentored Research Development Award, and I'm going to be giving you an introduction and overview to this mechanism. This is part of the MRDA Launch Pad series, and this is session 1. First, I'll talk about the purpose of the award and a little bit about the different types of awards, and then move into the process of applying for an MRDA, and then finally talk a bit about the review process to give you an overall picture of this mechanism and why it's an important component of the professional development core for a SEL. So first, just to mention, the Mentored Research Development Award is really not a research grant. It is really focused on developing grant proposals. So we have been talking about renaming this award. And actually, some have said that a Mentored Grant Development Award is probably a more appropriate title. So we haven't finalized what the title will be in the future, but it's best to think about the MRDA really as a Mentored Grant Development Award program. And the purpose of the MRDA is really to improve the success rate for clinical translational grant submissions. So again, these awards do not support research. They support writing a competitive grant proposal. The MRDA has a number of different components to help people write successful grant proposals. First of all, the most common type of MRDA includes release from non-research related responsibilities. So this might be clinical work or teaching or administrative roles. A second type of MRDA includes funding to allow for participation in defined activities that are associated with writing and submitting a competitive grant proposal. And I'll go into some detail as to what those activities might be in a few slides. A second component of the MRDAs is time for work with a chosen mentor, specifically to achieve specific milestones associated with the preparation of a targeted grant application. And this work is guided following a detailed mentoring plan and MRDA plan that the mentor and the mentee, the nominee for the MRDA, create together as part of the application process. The final component of these MRDA awards is access to extensive SL resources. So for example, there is an asynchronous grant writing course with YouTube videos that talk about various different components of grant writing, with the option for an in-person session with someone who's very successful at writing grants. There are also writing affinity groups for specific types of grant awards that you can join, which help over the course of a number of months to set out specific timelines and goals, which you are held accountable to by your peers. There's also the Junior Investigator Network, which has weekly meetings and peer mentoring groups that are part of the JIN, or Junior Investigator Network. You can also have grant review sessions where experienced researchers will review your grant as if it were being reviewed by a study section and provide you with feedback. And then there's also consultation to help with your grant writing process with the SL Biostatistics, Epidemiology, and Research Design Core. The BIRD core can help with laying out the types of analyses that are most appropriate to answer your research questions. They can also help with estimating sample size and things like that. And those are just a few of the most popular ASCEL resources that you would have access to as part of the MRDA. In terms of eligibility, the applicant must have a doctoral degree. They must hold a permanent full-time faculty level position at their institution, and they must fulfill the criteria of an NIH new investigator. Basically, that means that they can't have a large, substantial R01 level type grant yet from the NIH. The applicant also cannot hold a concurrent ASCEL research or pilot grant or have received a previous ASCEL MRDA for the same research grant opportunity. Individuals can apply for more than one MRDA throughout the course early in their career if they're applying for different grant opportunities. Those individuals must include as part of their application a review of how the prior MRDA award helped them move forward in their career goals and apply for a grant, and a reason for why they need another MRDA. There are 3 types of MRDAs. Type 1 is for clinical investigators. Clinical investigators are those who spend at least part of their time providing clinical care to patients. So here we are most frequently talking about folks either at Nemours or at Christiana. The MRDAs for clinical investigators provide coverage for up to 20% effort over 6 months. So the equivalent of 1.2 calendar months. Now, while we talk about this as 20% effort over 6 months, that doesn't need to be the format in which you plan out your time for the MRDA. So it can be 1 day a week for 6 months, or it can be compressed into a shorter time frame. So the shortest time frame possible is 5 continuous weeks of effort. And we really allow it up to the MRDA applicant and their mentor to decide what might be best for that mentee in terms of developing a grant proposal. For these MRDAs, half of the costs are covered by the MRDA itself, and half must be covered and protected by the clinician's division chief or department chair. So the clinician's division chief or department chair must agree to allowing the clinician be released from the amount of effort needed to engage in the MRDA, complete the activities, and write a competitive grant proposal. They must also agree to covering half of that effort. The second type of MRDA are for academic investigators. So these are typically folks who would be at DSU or University of Delaware. These may be folks with some kind of scientific or engineering background who are seeking to develop clinical and translational research grant proposals. Here, the coverage provided by the MRDA includes expenses for up to 10% effort or 0.6 calendar months, which is often equates to release from one course during one semester. There's no cost sharing required for these MRDAs. The third type of MRDA is a funding award. So these are for clinical or academic investigators who already have some protected research time. And that protected research time is enough time to write a competitive grant proposal. However, in order to improve the competitiveness of the proposal, they would be requesting up to $10,000 to engage in some specific activities. Those specific activities might include travel to meet with mentor or collaborators to create a very strong proposal. It could be attendance at conferences or workshops that are related to the grant topic area or grant writing specifically. It could be technical training or professional development activities to make the applicant themselves a more competitive person to receive the grant. It could be consultation regarding study design or data analysis. Perhaps there are some specific methodologies, some specialized types of design that you want to use that might not be represented in the BIRD Core. It could be payments to key informant advisory board members, so community partners, to help pay them to develop the proposal. It could be resources or supplies that would support grant writing. It could be publication fees for related manuscripts, again, to improve the biosketch of the applicant. It could also be used for grant editing. So this is not an exhaustive list, but it's a list of many different ways in which that funding, that $10,000, could be used to enhance a grant application. So the MRDA program also recognizes that certain researchers may have had significant difficulty in their prior research efforts due to their personal circumstances or the lack of accessible resources in their training environment, and therefore may be considered disadvantaged researchers. And these individuals can request an enhanced MRDA to cover effort or funding above what is provided by the standard MRDA. So this could be up to twice the effort, or up to twice the amount of time, or twice the amount of funds to bolster their professional network and to develop their grant proposal. Submission of a request for enhanced levels of support must receive administrative approval prior to submission of a full application. So now let's turn to the process of applying. So requests for MRDA applications are released at least twice per year. The typical cycle is that the RFA comes out sometime early in the summer, and that release for applications target application start dates of January 1st. There's also typically a late winter, early spring release of the RFA for applications starting on July 1st. Now, regardless of whether you start with a January 1st or July 1st start date, all of the activities for the MRDA need to be completed by the next June 30th. There are 3 steps to the application process. First is a letter of intent or a pre-application. The second step is a phone meeting with me between the letter of intent and the full application. And then the third and final step is the full application. I'd like to say just a little bit more about each of those steps. So the pre-application for the MRDA is submitted through the ACCEL dashboard under Submit a Preliminary Application. And in the pre-application, you're asked to provide demographic information that helps us characterize those who apply for the award, the type of grant proposal that you will be writing during the MRDA and its due date. So for example, you might be trying to write a grant proposal for an ACCEL pilot award, or for an R21. So you would tell us what grant mechanism you're targeting and its due date. An overview of the research to be proposed in the targeted grant application. So what is the topic of the grant that you will be proposing? The name, title, institution, and email address of your sponsoring mentor, and if applicable, any other mentors on your team. How much effort offset or funding you will be requesting, and the name of the individual who will release you from clinical teaching or other responsibilities if the MRDA is awarded. The desired start date and end date for the MRDA activities. And then finally, a mentor and mentee expectations form signed by you and your sponsoring mentor. So all of that information we gather in advance to make sure that you have the right people in place to move forward with your MRDA, and also to give us some information that will allow us to start identifying reviewers for your application. So this pre-application process is not reviewed by reviewers for content or anything like that. Rather, it's just reviewed administratively to make sure that you're on the right track and that we can know moving forward what we can expect to receive at the application process. So there are no letters of intent or pre-applications that are denied at this point. It's just preliminary information for our purposes. The next step is the MRDA conversation. And this is a brief 30-minute conversation with me to answer any questions you might have about the process, to clarify any information that you submitted in your pre-application, to confirm that you are applying for the best MRDA type for you, to discuss eligibility for the enhanced version of the MRDA, if that's something that you're interested in pursuing, to provide you then with some detailed instructions about using the website to submit your application, to provide detailed instructions about the various components of the application, and then also to discuss the review process. So this is really a two-way conversation to make sure that all of your questions are answered and to make sure that we're proceeding in the best ways to move you forward for a successful MRDA application. And then the third step, of course, is the final application for the MRDA. And again, this is submitted through the ESSEL dashboard under Submit a Proposal. When you get to this application phase, now we ask you to provide a research summary. So what research are you going to be proposing in the grant that you're going to be writing as part of the MRDA? That should be no more than 2 pages. We also ask for an MRDA plan and timeline. So the MRDA plan outlines specifically what do you plan to do during the MRDA award. For example, how many times do you plan to meet with your mentor? What sorts of activities offered through ESSEL do you plan to take advantage of? Basically, what are the basic steps you're going to do to develop this competitive grant proposal? And what is your timeline for accomplishing those goals? Again, that section is no more than 2 pages. If you're requesting a Type 3 funding only MRDA, we also ask you to provide a budget request with a justification for that budget. We also ask you to complete an individual development plan. That is an overview of what you hope to accomplish within the next 5 years of your career. And it asks you to talk about very different aspects of your career in addition to research. We ask for that with a specific purpose to better understand the full picture of what you want to do with your career and how the MRDA may help you accomplish those long-term goals. We ask for NIH formatted bio sketches for the MRDA candidate, the sponsoring mentor, and any other mentors or collaborators with significant roles in accomplishing the goals of the MRDA. We ask for a mentoring plan and support letters from each of the mentors named on the application. And finally, we ask for a letter from the applicant's division chief or their department chair confirming support for the applicant's participation in the MRDA program and providing assurance that the applicant currently has adequate protected time, if you're doing a Type 3 funding only MRDA, or will be released from clinical teaching or other responsibilities for the amount of time and duration requested if you're applying for a Type 1 or Type 2 MRDA. So lastly today, I'd like to talk just a little bit about the review process to give you an idea of, okay, you're providing all this information, what are our reviewers considering when they evaluate your application? So first, a little bit about the process of evaluation. So each MRDA application is reviewed by 2 researchers who are familiar with the mechanism. They may be part of the professional development core of a cell, or they may be prior awardees for the MRDA mechanism. To reduce conflicts of interest, the reviewers are at a partner institution, so they are not employed at the candidates or the sponsoring mentor's institution. So when folks from DSU submit an application, they may be reviewed by folks at Nemours, Christiana, or University of Delaware. The reviewers rate the mentor, the applicant, and the mentoring and the MRDA plans. They don't specifically evaluate the scientific merit of the research that you will be proposing in your grant application. Again, their focus is on the MRDA application itself. Once each of the reviewers has gone through our review criteria, which I will share with you in a moment, they then come together in a study section type format to present and discuss the applications and their scores. Then as a group, all of the reviewers decide which applications will be recommended to the ACEL Executive Committee for funding. After funding decisions are made, then the reviewer comments are provided to all applicants so that they can see what sorts of comments the reviewers made. Even those receiving funding can take those into consideration. They may want to tweak their plans slightly. Those who are not funded then can use that information to develop a stronger proposal for the next round of applications. And then finally, the review criteria. So as I said, our reviewers evaluate the mentor, the applicant, the MRDA plan, and the mentoring plan. So these first few items are really focused on the mentor and the mentoring plan components of the application. So first, they're asked to evaluate, does the mentor have appropriate experience as a mentor to junior faculty seeking research funding? And specifically there, they look at the past record of the mentee to see how many successful mentees they have had in the past. They also evaluate, is the mentor suitable for this project and this mentee? And in thinking through, is the mentor suitable for the project, that mentor may have specific expertise in the topic area or in the study design and methods. They could have one or both of those. Also, the reviewers are looking at whether the mentor was involved in this proposal. Next, they consider the mentoring plan. And they evaluate, is this mentoring plan appropriate for the project and the mentee? Is the mentor's role in the plan clear? Is the mentor devoting enough time to the mentee and specifically promoting their professional development and the creation of this competitive grant proposal? So those are the first 3 criteria. Then the reviewers turn their attention to the MRDA plan that the mentor and mentee has created. And they judge whether the MRDA plan is clear with specific goals and action plans, measurable outcomes, and realistic timelines. They evaluate whether the MRDA plan is consistent with and will facilitate the mentee's career goals as detailed in their individual development plan, specifically their research goals. They also evaluate whether there are sufficient collaborators, core lab resources, analytic tools, the mentoring team, and other relevant resources to support the mentee. And then the last 2 questions are kind of an overall assessment. They judge what is the likelihood that the applicant will be successful in competing for the grant that they're proposing, and what is the likelihood that the applicant will successfully accomplish the proposed objectives of the MRDA. So there, I hope that this provides a lot of background information about the MRDA, its purpose, its different components, the different types, the process of application, and then also the review criteria. So if you do have any additional questions, please reach out to mentoring@nemours.org or to me directly at Melissa Alderfer@nemours.org. Thank you.